Well, hello, everyone. My name is Gian-Carlo Carra. I am the City Councilor for Ward 9 and your candidate for re-election in the upcoming municipal election on October 18th. I think that this election is a huge one for the City of Calgary. I think we are at a historical turning point on a number of different fronts. And as a city and as a people, we are either going to follow oil and gas into a long decline, or we're going to rise on our strengths. And my commitment is that we rise together. And I've been hosting conversations with Carra because I believe that it's very important that we talk about big ideas. And as we enter the voting booth as Calgarians on October 18th, we do so as fully informed as we can be about the big issues that confront us and hopefully the best paths forward and the best paths forward together. I'm joined today by two incredible people, Indigenous people, which is the topic of this conversation. Good friend of mine, Wendy Walker, who I've known for years now and who's acting as a traditional knowledge keeper on the Carra for Ward 9 campaign. She's an amazing singer-songwriter, and she's Micmac and Metis. And she has asked a very good friend of hers, Chief Lee Crowchild. Chief Lee Crowchild is a towering figure in Tsuut'ina culture. He's third generation chief. I know him because he was the incredibly powerful and do not mess with this man chief who really represented Tsuut'ina Nation from 2016 to 2019. And in that time, he really started to transform the relationship the City of Calgary has with our adjacent Tsuut'ina Nation, with his vision, with his understanding of where we were. And when I talked to Wendy about how we could have a very meaningful conversation and who we could talk with, she said, Lee will do it. I said, there's no way. And yet here he is today. I will start this conversation really quickly with a very brief land acknowledgement, because I spend a lot of time when I'm talking to settler folks about the importance of the land acknowledgement. I don't think I need to talk to you guys about the importance of the land acknowledgement. But what I basically do is I say, we are rewriting the history. We tell the story. We tell ourselves about who we are. And I think that the default understanding amongst Calgarians was that this was a place that began as a place 130 or so years ago when a bunch of Euro-Canadians showed up. And that's false. And not only is it false, it does a disservice to what we're trying to accomplish here together. And so instead, we acknowledge that the act of building community on this land started in time immemorial. It started with the signatories of the Treaty 7, the Nitsitapi, the Blackfoot people, the three nations of the Blackfoot, the Yaye Nakota, and the Beaver people, the Tsuut'ina people. And these are very different people with very different traditions and very different languages. And they lived on this land and, you know, not always super friendly, but made community together and got through it. And the act of signing Treaty 7 was an allowance. It was a peace treaty to allow Euro-Canadian and then international Canadian sharing of this land in the act of building community together in the way it's been done since time immemorial. So I need you to just start off, critique my land acknowledgement.
Well, are you muted or unmuted?
Good.
Good. How about before we do that, we just have a little presentation to do to Chief Crowchild, because one of the things that we have is protocol, and we always want to follow those protocols because the protocol and the offering of the medicine kind of keeps us on the straight path, and that's where we want to go with this conversation to benefit all those who are watching. So on behalf of it's hard to do this serious with you. On behalf of the Carra team, I would like to offer you, my brother, this tobacco, and I'm going to put it in his hot little hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. And yeah, I totally screwed up the protocol there.
That's okay. That's okay. And I'm just going to ask him if that's okay. Just going to ask him just to talk a little bit about because there's a whole pile to his background, but just going to ask him to talk a little bit about the significance of the tobacco, if you're okay with that.
I would love that.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I don't know why she's having a hard time to be serious with me, but anyways. Thank you very much for this gift of tobacco. You know, people do ask, well, you know, why tobacco? And, you know, to the unschooled and that, they would say, those Indians, they just want free smokes to smoke. You know, and there is a little bit of truth to that, because, you know, you give this tobacco to, it doesn't matter who they are. Sometimes I've seen people come up to those that live on the streets, and they always have a pack of smokes, say, do you want some smokes? You know, and for those that are on the street, that's, you know, that is a bit of a lifeline, to be quite honest. You know, in our judgment, we say, well, that's not really healthy in that, but to a lot of them, it's a real signal that you actually care about them. You know, because you've acknowledged that this is a very important traditional protocol to hand to somebody. And it brings you down to, well, not down, I should say down. It brings you to a level of understanding that both have created a sacred space. You know, a lot of people that don't smoke tobacco, we take this and we'll take it into our prayer ceremonies. We'll wrap it in a cloth and we'll hang it in the trees, so the spirits know that what the intentions of whoever gave that tobacco, whoever received it. Now you saw that Wendy gave me this tobacco. She just put it in my hand like this. Really, in a real traditional way, a person wouldn't even touch that tobacco until a person's told them exactly what they're wanting. Because if they can't fulfill it, says, no, I can't do what you're asking me, but I know somebody who can.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so in that way you can refuse the tobacco. So when you're, just so you know, for the audience here, if you ever have to give tobacco, you just hold it in your hand until you state exactly what your intentions are, and then you can hand it to them. And that person has the option to either accept it or say no. It's not always just a given, we're going to do this so we get past this ceremony and carry on. That's the importance of tobacco. You know? So I'm not that much of a smoker, but I do have a ceremony I'm going to take this to. And I want to thank you and your team for asking me to talk here. It's an honor for me. You know, I'm not that tough a guy as you might think. You know,
I don't believe that for a second. I think you're an incredibly tough guy. And I'm sitting here on pins and needles, but
no, I'm really a gentle guy. You ask it, Wendy. Wendy is sort of like my older sister, so she puts me in line.
Your younger sister. Stop.
Okay. Well, she always puts me in line anyways. But here's the tobacco. You can also give tobacco as little as this little pinch here. That's called a tobacco tie. It has the same impact, the same impression as this. So this is one of those cases where size doesn't really matter. You know, the intention is always in this. When I became chief, to all my council members, I just gave them this one little twist of tobacco. And I says, all my intentions and all my transparency of everything is tied to this. If I violate anything like this, you can remind me of what my intentions were, what my promises were. So that's just another thing. So thank you very much. I've rattled on a bit more, so I'll turn it back to you.
Good job.
no, I think that that's a great thing to hear. And thank you, Wendy, for helping me out. And I look forward to a time when we can do these things in person and I can place it in your hand safely. Do you want to talk for a moment about the land acknowledgement, which is a symbolic act that has sort of been dictated by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as one of the symbolic acts that we can do in our pursuit of truth and reconciliation? You want to talk about that and its importance and maybe critique mine, sir?
Okay, it's not for me to critique. But you know, when he says it was sort of mandated by Truth and Reconciliation, it actually goes beyond that. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we need to learn here in Calgary and surrounding area is that all of us here, those of you that are watching us here, I would consider you as a person of treaty as well. It's not an agreement that was just between the government and all the First Nations. The government is only representative of who you are, because we're sharing the land with you. Under treaty, we agreed to share everything that was above the ground. So anything you can see, we agreed we're going to share that with you, because we don't want to kill you, and you certainly don't want to kill us. We have to come up with a better way of living life. So this is how we coexist. So in a land acknowledgement, it's not just about naming all the nations itself. It's about naming your place on the land. So we acknowledge, you could say, I too am a treaty person, living on the land of Treaty 7, which consists of these 7 nations in that. That would be a good way to say it, because the land is really the most important thing here. Not the people or not the nations, it's the land. And you and I and everybody else that's watching this live on this land. So that brings up a whole different set of principles about how we coexist, how we live in peace with each other, because we have our responsibilities now, not so much to each other, but to the land and to those animals that are in there and everything that exists in that. And those are my ancestors and your ancestors that worked on this ground, and they rest on this ground as well. It's really important.
So just going to interject for a quick sec. There's a question, Leon, do you want to deal with this right now?
Question for Lee Crowchild. What do you think about the native nation that are not recognized by Canada as native nations? I'm going to assume I mean as native nations.
Yeah. Like Michelle Band, for
Michelle
example.
Band and
As an example.
Papa's Chase.
Yeah, Papa's Chase, as examples.
Yeah, well, they became disenfranchised a long time ago through the treaty and recognition of that.
Can we put a little bit more context into that question, just so everyone can follow along?
So a long time ago, they're both out of the Edmonton area, aren't they? Papa Chase Band and Michelle Band have been fighting for their rights as treaty people to have that recognition and that designation. And that has been denied to them. Now, I'm just going to give it back over to Lee to kind of give a bit more context to that.
Holy smokes.
Oh.
I want to speak just actually to the question directly here, because I could go on for a long time on this. I think that these nations that you're kind of maybe referring to here in Alberta, they are part of the land, and through what is known as the Indian Act, it changed a lot of things. It's not the treaty. Treaty and Indian Act are 2 different things. What the Indian Act was policy. It's not the treaty, it's policies. This is how the government saw how they're going to control First Nations. So if you didn't fall under these policy rules and that, well, hey, then you're out of luck. We're going to disenfranchise you. We're going to disenfranchise the Michelle Band, I guess, and Papa's Chase. Those are up in the Edmonton area.
Yeah.
So that sort of applies to all across Canada, wherever that exists in that. It was the Indian Act that created this level of disenfranchisement. So you can be true to your own nation, even though that's where you came from, and you're absorbed into the community. And in this case, Edmonton. South Edmonton is sort of, well, that's all Papa's Chase land.
Yeah.
Edmonton took it over.
Actually, where the provincial legislature sits, there's terraces there, and there's incredible history and stories. One of my dear friends, her mother was born there, and people lived there for a very, very long time. So just to give people a little bit more context.
So, I mean, I guess sadly, the legacy of Western colonialism is that Europeans showed up with a very sketchy understanding of how things actually work. They just drew lines, they banded people off. And so the intent of the peace treaties of Treaty 7, Treaty 6 was to share the land. But then the Indian Act came along, and integral to the Indian Act was the residential school system. And one of the reasons why we're having this conversation, and it's so topical, and so many people are watching right now, is because of the terrible legacy of the residential schools that is now being pulled out of the ground. I mean, it impacted the Canada Day that we had. Wendy, we did not celebrate Canada Day this year. We celebrated with the performances from Indigenous artists, and a huge number of Calgarians showed up wearing orange. So I guess why don't we just tackle right now, right there, as the number of Native, of Indigenous children who were murdered in the residential school system. You know, it's no longer a question of cultural genocide, it's a question of actual genocide. Can you address that for us?
You know, and just as you're talking, you're actually making good jumps between things to get to a point, and you have to give context for all of this. So I'm just eating a plum here, but I'm going to talk about context. So let's go back to before the signing of treaties and that. Sort of our oral history and a particular ceremony. And I'm going to use two nations for an example. We got the Blackfoots and we got the Crees. In those long time ago days, they kind of didn't get along with each other, so they have battles between themselves. You know, so let's talk about one particular battle. Just it's a make-believe one here right now, but they have this battle. Both sides would have killed somebody else or wounded, or their war deeds on that battlefield. Well, eventually it has to break off, so both sides break off, and then they cool off, they cool down, they collect their dead that are on the field and they bring them back, and then there's this cooling off period. After a while, one of the chiefs from either one of that would say, now we have to make a war lodge. This is what a war lodge is. You know, so he would get what we call in the English translation is the tobacco runner. The tobacco runner was like an emissary. You know, like any other country, you have an emissary, you have an ambassador that represents that country or that nation. Same thing. What this tobacco runner would take is the pipe, a pipe for smoking. On the prairies, that's everything. That pipe is everything. So you tell the tobacco runner, take my chief's pipe, because it was belonging to the chief. You take this tobacco, and I want you to go to that camp over there, however far it was, and say we need to talk. We need to have our war lodge now. So this emissary is in a very precarious position, because upon sight in the other camp, they could come and they could kill him, and then that's it. Or else they allow him to come in. And if he was able to talk to the chief, and the chief actually smoked that pipe, it was an agreement then there that they're going to make this war lodge. So they agree on a set place. Now in that set place, this is where the term making wolf comes in. That's the English translation, making wolf. So why a wolf? Why that word? Well, when you think about a wolf, you know, I mean, we like to give it very, very human characteristics about being noble and lone wolf and all of these really positive attributes. And that's fine, we can do that. But we got to understand that a wolf is also a wild animal. I was reminded of this very clearly. It says you can call all these animals whatever you want, but they are wild animals still. So they come together, both sides come together into this war lodge, whether it's a teepee or just an area that's set. And protocol is everything. So they go through their protocols of smoking their pipes and doing their ceremonies with their medicine men. They would never exchange anything at all with each other. They'll sit on both sides. Once those protocols are finished, the oration starts. One side would get up, one person would get up and say, in this battle, I made war deeds. My deed is I killed 2 of you. So the other side would have to reciprocate that. Say, yes, that's right. You did kill 2. We saw that. One of them was my best friend, and maybe the other one was my uncle. No, that's who they were. But here's my war deeds. And so the whole battle is played out by everybody. Both sides, saying they're playing out the whole battle scene. And this is where the making wolf comes out. Once that is all said and done, you have 2 outcomes. One is you put that battle to rest. Say, we don't need to fight about this anymore. We're going to make peace on this. Or the other thing is say, no, you son of a bitches, let's step outside and let's continue this battle. You know, so that's what making wolf is. Regardless of that outcome, what has really happened is both sides told the truth. So from that point immemorial, time immemorial, people can talk about that battle and it's the truth. Nobody can lie about that. You know, because they both acknowledge both sides. So that's what making wolf is. Now let's bring it into modern context here. The signing of treaty number 7, whatever number treaty, peace treaties and that, you know, both sides came together. We don't want to kill each other. We agreed to that. So on the government side, they say, this is the treaty that we're going to respect, you know. So we say, and then the people would touch the pen. You know, this is the pen. The chiefs would touch the pen and that. And that was their sign to give permission for their name to be written out on the treaty, because they didn't know how to write in that English language. And so in doing that, there was the treaty was signed. It was agreement. Now, right behind that, the government says, no, right behind this is how we're going to govern you. This is the policy, the Indian Act policy that's going to govern you. And by the way, all your knowledge that you have, we're gonna hold on to it for you. And I like to use the metaphor of a horse. A horse contains all their knowledge. And they say, we're gonna hold this horse for you. It's here whenever you want it. Just come and get it in Alaska and we'll freely give it to you. But here's the Indian Act. So in the Indian Act, they said, we need to keep you people warm. So we're gonna give you blankets. Blankets infected with smallpox. Because really, we don't want you we want to be able to break this treaty in our subtle ways. So we survived that. And then he said, well, no, and now we're going to give you residential schools because we really want you to be like us. But these holy people, these churches, we're going to use them to deliver our message and take care of you. And this is where Christianity has stepped up. You know, and the separation of church and state at that time never occurred. You know, so that was what residential school did. We survived that. We get into the 60s, and the government says, you know, things aren't as good as we thought we should. So we're going to introduce something new, and that's called the 60s scoop. We're going to take all your children, we'll take them from you, and we're going to send them to all parts of the world, not just Canada, but all parts of the world, so they can learn to live, coexist with us. You know, it's always this guardian-ward relationship going on. And then those that did not get scooped, like in my case, they introduced busing into the villages, into the towns, into the cities. So we can learn to live like, well, in this case, like regular Calgarians. You know, so that was the intention. Well, the Indian Act starts coming to play here. People start getting educated. And in the Indian Act, it originally says, well, we're only going to guarantee you to give you education up to grade 8. So everybody gets to grade 8 and say, well, we want more, we want to go to school. So the government says, well, we can't do that. So they have to be creative in their thinking. It says, okay, what we'll do is we'll raise the age of the term youth to age 18. That'll give you the years to get to grade 12. So we get there. You say, well, we still want to go to school. Well, we have to do something about, okay, we'll increase the age to 21. So if you think in logical linear terminology, to age 21, you're kind of getting to your university degrees by then. But a lot of people didn't. So, well, we still need to go to school. We said, well, we'll get, okay, final offer, age 29. You're going to be called a youth. That way we can justify giving money. So that was a real dirty trick that they played on us. Because in our whole native discourse, and you can hear it in a lot of natives, they'll talk about the youth, you know, but they're not really talking about the youth, those that are before puberty. They're talking about anybody that's under age 29. They don't know anything. They're youth. That was a real trick they played on us. So we think of our own people as youth. Like we've taken over that. So anyways, that's what they did. And then those that went to university, they got their degrees. They became the doctors and lawyers and everything that you see and that. But they were kind of still dispossessed from the roots of who we are. Because what language wasn't introduced in that? So now here we are. We got all these professionals who say, we're going to work on this and that. And the government says, okay, well, we'll keep you humble right now. We're going to introduce this millennial scoop because your kids are not where they think we should be. But hey, we don't have to do the work anymore. We've taught you how to do this so you can be your own worst enemies that way with the millennial scoop. So there we are. Oh, and by the way, here's your horseback. Here's your knowledge of that. So we're looking at our horses. We're trying to make it go. Say, okay, work for us. And the horse just stands there. And the horse is saying, tell me what to do. I'm right here to help you. The problem is we don't know how to talk to that horse anymore. It doesn't understand the language that we talk in. So all of that side of that battle of making wolf was based on ignorance and racism. That's the legacy of that side of the treaty. But like I said, in making wolf, there's two sides to every story. So Native people across Canada, Indigenous, First Nations, whatever you want to call them, Dineta, for us, we have a story we have to tell too. At the signing of a treaty, we agreed we're not going to kill them anymore. So we didn't. But we see all of these things happening, and people of the land say, I don't like that, I don't accept that. But I can't, I can't do the way we in the old days. We used to go into battle and fight for what we believed in. So we're left with what? Okay, well, I think I'm going to use my body. This is my only weapon I have right now, is my body here. So I'm going to use it. I'm going to drink. I'm going to drink alcohol because they want me to be a ward of state. I'll make sure that they do that. In the end, I'm going to use drugs as well. And hell, I'm even going to use my body for sex. This is how I'm going to fight back against the government. You want to keep me a ward? Well, then we'll make sure that they're going to pay the price for that. Subconsciously, that's what happens in that. But out of that develops prejudice, not racism, not ignorance, it's prejudice. And we've taught ourselves how to be prejudiced. So we're steeped in anger. And it doesn't matter, it could be the nicest guy or woman, but if you're white, I'm not going to like you. Just for that simple reason, you're white. Because of everything that happened to us. This is all I got left in my body here. So my mind is going to be filled with anger, and my heart's going to be filled with anger. So like I said, in the making wolf, whatever the outcome is, so either have peace going forward or you continue to have that battle. But we haven't talked about the truth. We haven't talked about the truth. Neither side has talked about the truth. Or we're jumping to reconciliation right away. Everybody wants to reach reconciliation. I work with groups in the city of Calgary that talk about reconciliation. And I say, all right, well, let's talk about truth first. And people get confused. Well, I wasn't there. My family didn't do that. Why should we have to talk about the truth? So that's where we're kind of stuck right now. And now we've discovered that originally it was 215, and every day it grows more and more. And there are a lot of good Canadian people from whatever their background that are just as shocked. This is what we've been saying all along, all these years, but they're just shocked now. Now the evidence is here. So what emerges is anger from both sides. On the non-native side, it sort of polarizes those racist held beliefs and the ignorance. On the native side, on the native side, it can amplify, and it has done, the anger of prejudice. We want to get back at it. We just want to do that. Yet I'm saying we need to talk about truth first. Put reconciliation on the side. Just put it on the side. Don't have to dismiss it. Just put it on the side for now, because now we got to talk about the truth. And as Calgary is going through this whole election in the fall here, this is one of the things that needs to be talked about. We need to talk about the truth about what actually happened and what our roles and responsibilities are from both sides. And this is where it was always been at the root of anything I did when I was the sitting chief, before I was chief, and even as I ran recently for national chief. It was always at the root of my sense. We have to talk about the truth. Whether it's me that pushes it for champions forward or not, I don't think it should be me. Because I've had this fight for all my life, and I'm kind of actually getting a little bit tired of it. But I see the hope, and you always have to have the hope. Those of you that are sitting out and watching this, I say there's the hope that things will get better. that your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, you're going to say, I'm glad that my grandparents did that for me. So we can kind of live in this era of a new direction. How do we get there? For me, as I ran for national chief, I always says, we need to make amendments to the Canadian Constitution. That's a big to-do. It ain't, and that's going to take a few more years of conversation before we even get there. But I think it's inevitable that we're going to have to get there. The finding of these 215 and that number is just going to grow every week. It's going to grow and grow. Is another layer of the onion being peeled. The first layer of that onion was the survivors. That's how TRC came about. And all of us, we helped catch the tears of those survivors because they're able to finally tell their story. And we helped them, and we started healing from that. And then they found these graves. My generation, Wendy's generation, our age group in that, we're caught now. Who's catching our tears? Why? It's because those ones that they're finding, those are probably our uncles and aunties and grandparents that never gave us the love. They never had the chance to show that to us. So our age group is kind of paralyzed right now. Don't know what to do. We're going to get through it. I don't know how, but we are going to get through it. Calgarians and Canadians and all across Canada, they're sympathetic. There's some that are just going to be who they are. Say, goddamn, we beat those goddamn fucking Indians. Why can't they just learn to be like us? Yeah, and that attitude exists there.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have to repeat that. You all know that.
Yeah.
I'm just putting it out in plain words here because I talk in plain language.
Yeah.
And anyways, but there's another layer of that onion. This is where it's going to impact all the rest of Canada. Because it's going to make you kind of look at where we talk about truth.
But the other thing too is that not everybody's ready for that truth, or not everybody wants that truth. I remember being at an event before COVID, and this lady came up to me, older non-Indigenous lady came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm so happy you were here, and because now we have reconciliation." And I gently reminded her, we have a bridge named reconciliation. That's all we got. And she's like, "But we've got reconciliation. It's all good now." And I'm like, "No, it's not all good." I said, "It's not good until, as Lee was talking about earlier, until you can hear my truth, our truth. And that's uncomfortable, right? And not everybody is ready yet to sit and hear that truth, because it goes back to, for some people, well, I didn't do it. Why should I, right? Why should I be bothered? So as some of us are going down that path, right, to hopefully get to that place, because Lee's right, we're nowhere near reconciliation because we haven't even gotten to the truth. And until we get to that truth piece, we don't have anything. We got nothing to move forward with because we don't have the truth. We have the illusion, and that's it.
So Wendy, I was rocked by the discovery of the 250 bodies in Camden's, but I know that was nothing compared to what you were.
No, and it's something we've been saying for years, and nobody, I know I've been saying it, and so many others have been saying it, and nobody would listen to us. Nobody would believe us.
Can you talk a little bit? Chief Crowchild just talked about how they're the survivors, but then there are the children of the survivors who had to deal with that intergenerational trauma.
I'll just speak for my own self. My father went to residential school, and my mother was at age 5, was put in a sanitarium, even though she didn't have tuberculosis. But my kukum and my other aunties and uncles did. And so on my poor little mama, they tried a variety of different medications. So we know that there was medical experiments done on our parents, our grandparents, maybe not everyone. We know that different things were tried on those kids. I know from my own father, who went at age 4, all the atrocities that you hear, those happened, those really happened. To have young, in my case of my father, who was at a very young age, was raped, was starved, and was beaten, was denied access to his family, was denied access to his culture, was told how bad and how dirty he was. My mother was told the same thing, but from the medical side. So these two people come together, and now they have a family. And everything that they learned, which was not how to be parents. How do you learn how to be a good parent? You learn how to be a parent by being around parents, right? We don't go to parenting school. I mean, we have parenting classes now, but we don't go there initially to learn how to be parents. We learn how to be parents because we were raised with our parents, we were raised around our grandparents, and we see how we raise our children. When my parents didn't have that opportunity to grow up around to learn how to be parents, and everything that my father learned in residential school, he brought into that family. And I can tell you, as a survivor, I still have nightmares. I still literally have nightmares. I still have days where it is so incredibly hard to get up and put those one foot in front of the other. And I'm sad that no one would believe me. So there was no real help for us. And I found for my own self that I brought some of that, as much as I did some healing work in a non-Indigenous way, which didn't really support me because you talk and talk. And so just reliving the trauma and reliving those triggers. And regrettably, many of us brought some of that into our children. And so that intergenerational trauma happens at a cellular, it's in our cells, it's cellular memory. And we have it and we carry it. For me, how do I work through some of that? It's through prayer. It's through connecting with my brother here and having those honest conversations, as painful as they are. And they hurt us. But until we have the truth, to go back to that, we don't get to the other side. There isn't healing either on my part without telling the truth of my story. So I'll just stop there, I think.
If I could just reflect for a moment. I believe that we're in a moment of historical change, of shift. And I think that there are 3 kinds of Calgarians that exist today. I think there are those who understand that we have serious problems with systemic racism and racism in Calgary, in Canada, and that does not jive with our ideal of who we are as Canadians, and that needs to be addressed. I think there are probably the overwhelming majority of Calgarians who don't understand that and need to learn, and they need to hear the truth, and we need to have these difficult conversations so we can move forward. And I think because we are starting to have those difficult conversations more publicly, I think the third group, which are the people who, whether they understand that we have a problem or not, are committed to keeping things the way they are, committed to maintaining. And that's why you're seeing a rise of overt racism. And so I'm dedicating my campaign to talking about how there is no rising unless we rise together, and that an equitable city, an anti-racist city, needs to be our goal at this historic moment. And there is, in the Canadian context, no anti-racism without truth and reconciliation. But I know, Chief Crowchild, you've got something to say about the term anti-racism. You've certainly said a lot about truth and reconciliation. I would love to hear your response to that.
To anti-racism?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is whether you talk about anti-racism or anti-oppression.
Okay.
You know, because a person doesn't have to be a racist to be still working with oppression. You know, I think that's, and I think that's where visiting the Canadian Constitution is kind of key to this. I don't know if that's going to happen in my lifetime.
Can you talk about what that visitation of the Canadian Constitution would look like?
Because I think what it will do, it'll kind of all the nations across Canada, all the First Nations across Canada, they're going to say this is how we're all going to coexist on this land. You know, because it's based on the principles of what the land is telling us. We're faced with the realities of climate change here. You know, we're replaced. You know, we're faced with all these realities. You know, I know 15 years ago I was with the province of Alberta, and we're talking about the glacier that feeds the Bow River and how much it's receding. And they at that time it says we got about 50 years left on that glacier before it all dries out. Well, in those 15 years, it's receded much faster than they really thought it was. You know, so now you look at that Bow River and everybody enjoys it right now. We have to do something that's going to allow us to have water, because without water, who are we? We can't live more than 4 days without water. We can live a long time without food. Look at me, I can live for a couple months without eating. You know, but I couldn't live 4 days without water. You know, so it's important. Those are the things that are important. Racism, anti-racism, and that. We can talk about that because everybody has an opinion on what that looks like. But it was always steeped in the colonial approach of what churches dictated to us. You know, and I say of all faiths that come in there, there's a level of this oppression that exists. There's a hierarchy. Those that are the chosen ones, as they like to see themselves, and then all the way down from there. You know, I'll use the example. I had my grandson die the other day. He didn't come from a family that was on a nation that was very popular. You know, so at his funeral, you could see nobody ever showed up outside of our family, that because nobody wanted to be. They didn't really care about that family. It exists in my community. That's just what it is. You know, so you put that into Calgary's context. In that there are those on the streets that nobody really cares about. You know, we all have an opinion about that. Some of us want to go out there and really help them. Others just couldn't care less, whatever that is. But they're still human beings. Mm-hmm. When I was kept out of residential school by my grandparents, and in that way, maybe I was kind of chosen to do that, and I don't really understand why. But when I turned 18 and I had these ideas, I got accepted to York University. I got accepted to the University of Manitoba, but instead I traveled around the world for a year and a half. My grandparents told me, says, Lee, or McCookins, that was my name. Lee, you have to go look for the human beings. I never understood what they meant by that. What do you mean human beings? Look at all, they're all over. And he says, no, there's lots of people, lots of millions and millions of people, but there's very few human beings. So that was in my life journey. I'm 63 years old now. I think the human beings I've met, less than 10, because I really understood what they really mean about the human beings. There's a lot of people that try to become that. But anyways, I'm kind of digressing a little bit there. As we're talking about racism, anti-racism, and that, I don't know if you can see those pictures behind me on the wall, but those, because I'm Dene, and Apaches are also Dene. So behind me on those pictures there is what's known as crown dancers. They dance, they wear these masks, and they have these big ornate items on top of their head, all different directions, kind of like Martians. You know, when people say, well, what's that dance about? And they say it's because those people are going to come back, and they gave us this dance so we wouldn't be scared when we see them again. So you see 4 dances there. There's actually 5 dances. I'm just going to grab one. This is the 5th dancer. So he's not as elaborate as the others. And he's sort of like the trickster, or the contrary. He does everything backwards to what everybody else does. He's a real foolish person. That these other four dancers are doing this whole elaborate, and he just copies, mimics them like a comic, like a court jester in a way. Why is that? Is to bring balance. So as we go down this road towards anti-racism, anti-oppression, we have to find the balance in that. We have to be able to kind of laugh at ourselves for our foolishness, you know, and that's what that being brings, you know, because they do everything the opposite. We kind of, oh, what a foolish person. But it's meant to teach us. It's meant to teach us about being judgmental, about having opinions about everything. Because I mean, my opinion doesn't really matter in the whole scheme of things. I'm just another guy. You know, maybe I accomplished one or two things, but really, I'm just another guy. It's the impact of my being and how it impacts other people to act. When I became Hakije, or chief, like I says, that little piece of tobacco, like I showed you earlier, a little piece of tobacco is everything. And that's my conviction to my council members, my community, and to people, everybody I met. It's just all based on this one little piece of tobacco. I mean, I could use this pouch of tobacco too. I could use a whole bunch, but it doesn't matter because my commitment always relies on this one piece. And as I know we're getting close to the end here. I'm just seeing my chat there.
Yeah.
She's very good at keeping us on task.
Yeah. Yay, Devin. Devin's the best.
So it's my conviction to how I exist in this land. I look outside my window here and there's bushes there. There's a magpie nest just behind there. And I watch them raise their little kids to now. In the mornings, they're really loud, you know, because that's just the way they are. But it's kind of, you just sit back and reflect on life. We're faced with the reality of this COVID. They talk about this fourth wave, you know, but really it's still the first wave. It's just the first wave repeating itself over and over again. Because what we're addressing is our fear and our ego. Those are two things that are creating this wave to go over and over again. Because the real second wave is about love. We don't say that word long enough. It took me years to actually say that. But as we realize love for our fellow human beings, that is the second wave. But we keep repeating the first wave because we just don't learn. You know, and people, anti-vaxxers and those that are pro-vaccine, it's only their ego talking. There's no real reason why they should talk such silliness. You know, we know that we should vaccinate. I did. You know, I used traditional medicines to begin with to hopefully increase my immunity. And I was lucky enough that I never caught it, so I got my double vaccination, and I'm still here, and I'm so thankful for that. You know, for Calgary, as you enter into this new era of a new political leadership, and it'll change. You know, so many people are there's going to be so many new positions that it will change that. You know, anti-racism is certainly part of that. You know, environment.
And when you go back to the anti-oppression piece, right? And the systemic racism and oppression that exists even within the city of Calgary, right? And so changes need to happen at that level, but also they need to happen at a community level. And because we build from the ground up, right? Not from the top down. And so how do we, because I do live in Calgary and love Calgary very much. I have my family here. So how do we help dismantle those that oppress us, those that keep us from moving forward? Because, oh, you're this kind of a person because you're Native. Well, that doesn't allow me to move forward. Doesn't allow my children to move forward. Doesn't allow those coming into the city who don't know city life to move forward. And we face those barriers. Just had to chuck that in, sorry.
Well, I don't know if I'm hearing what I want to hear here, but as you know, Wendy, and you really counseled me on this campaign. You know, I've said an equitable city, an anti-racist city. I'll start using the term, with your permission, Chief Crowchild, and an anti-oppressive city. But we're also talking about climate action, which is fundamentally about how we're all in this together. And as you say, it's all about the land. And then the final thing is democracy and dialogue, where even if we disagree, we have to get back to the place, I think, where we can make wolf and agree on what the truth is, because that's something that's slipping through our hands right now. And that's something that deeply concerns me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
so
agree.
we talk about human rights, and I think, well, human rights are really arrogant. Again, that's ego. We talk about civil rights. Well, that's really kind of limited because that's really ignorant of a lot of things. But really, we got to talk about the natural rights, the rights to exist on land. And that's for all of us. We have to acknowledge the natural rights of what gives us permission to exist today. Tomorrow, a couple of you might not even be here in this world. I don't know. Hopefully, I am, and I think all of you are going to be. But it's the gift of having to live for another day. My grandpa always told me, he says, in the morning there's this voice, and it would say to you, it said, McCookins, how are you going to change the world today? And he would tell me, you listen to that for just the snap of your finger. That's how long you listen, because your ego takes over. You kind of know how you want to live your life. And he says, but in time it gets longer and longer. You need to listen to it. And yeah, after all these years, I said, okay, how am I going to change the world? It isn't me that's going to change the world. It's all of us collectively how we're going to change the world. So I know we need to wrap up here really quick.
Yeah.
So I've appreciated this time to talk with all of you. And if any of you see me on walking on the streets or anywhere, in the city, it's okay to come up to me and say, Chief Crowchild, I really listen to what you say. I like it so much. I want to take you to McDonald's.
No, it's not McDonald's, right?
Says her.
Not McDonald's. No, don't take them to McDonald's ever. So I know we really do have to wrap up. We're being told. So just for myself to be connected to UGC and to be a part of this team, I'm profoundly grateful for the opportunity. And I truly do believe that you are a man of great vision. I believe you have an amazing heart in you. I know I've actually benefited from your amazing heart and your kindness. And so I just want to thank you so much for wanting to have this dialogue and to have this conversation. And hopefully it's just the beginning of this conversation that needs to continue to happen within the city as a whole, because we are many nations now living in Calgary. We aren't just Indigenous and I guess non-Indigenous, meaning I think we can almost think of non-Indigenous people as just solely white people. But we are many people living here. I know where I live in the Northeast, it's a smorgasbord of the world, right?
World of Canadians now.
Right, so that I need to be, and as I learn more about other cultures, but also just to have people, as the chief said, if you see us on the street, don't be afraid to come up to us. Don't be afraid to approach us. Even those that you see that you think you don't like because they don't look a certain way, because maybe they're homeless. So for everybody out there, just be well, take care, many blessings. I'm going to give over to you for last thoughts, and then over to GC, and then we're out of here.
If I could leave the last thoughts for the chief and just say one thing and then hand it to you, Chief, I would say that you did an amazing job of starting to build a bridge between Calgary City Council and the Tsuut'ina Nation when you were chief. And I remember when we first met, you invited us to dinner, and we had dinner at the high school, deep in the Tsuut'ina country, deeper than I've ever gone, and it was fascinating. I remember you asked me at the end of that evening, how are you going to change the world? And I've thought about that ever since, and I believe we're at the cusp of making some meaningful changes, but I'm hearing from you loud and clear that the answer is we're going to change it together. And I think we're going to have to use a sort of a second wave of love. But I turn it over to you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom and your final thoughts.
Okay, I guess I'm the one that has to really be thankful for here to give the chance to talk to a lot of people here. You know, for that, I'm really grateful. Yeah, it's not going to be an easy journey. Believe me, it's not going to be easy. But we're all here with hope. If you don't have hope, then you know what's the purpose of moving on? So I want to leave you all with hope. Hope that we are going to get through this. But we're gonna have to get our noses bloody. It's just what's going to happen. And it's okay to have that good fight, but make wolf in the end. You know, because yeah, and I don't know if I can say anything more, but other than I will go to McDonald's, despite what she says. I gotta finish. You know, I gotta finish making my peach cobbler. I've been kind of mixing or cherry cobbler.
Cherry.
I've been mixing the batter as we've been talking here.
Well, thank you so much, and I feel hope, and I look forward to changing the world together.
Because you know, this is one part. This is the first step in making that change together. It's the first step in rising together. Is to start to have these honest conversations with each other, and as Lise says, yeah, maybe to get your nose bloodied a little bit.
Yeah, there's 75,000 self-recognized First Nations in Calgary. In the latest census back, that was a few years ago. But I'm sure it hasn't changed, it hasn't shrunk any more of that. So there's 75,000.
Exe maga.
Okay.
Exe maga.
See us, Gus, and thank you very much.
Exe.